Okay, today I've got a piece of stretch canvas, as you might be able to tell, white, and I've toned it kind of a gray olive. I think I use a little black, a little yellow ochre, and a lot of white. And that's pretty much how I tamed it. And I always like to show you guys basically a white next to it. So I'm just going to hold up this white tube so you can see where the value is at. Okay? So this is a light coming in, lighting the base of a eucalyptus, kind of filtering in, hitting some stuff. We've got a lot of scrubby stuff up in here. Sky coming through, ground plane. Don't like these logs, so I'm going to extend the shadows and just kind of create some shadows out there. Kind of like I see, but a little bit of making up. I just don't like that straight line, that harsh straight line. I love the green down here. So let's kind of just start with this little area right here. Just so I kind of know where it is. Once I have that in there, which is about somewhere in here, and it's going to come up, probably up in here, eventually kind of work its way up towards there, and there's a V in it right about there. Okay, once we start getting most of this kind of stuff in here, a few of these marks, let's do the nice tall straight one. Where does that fall? Slightly off center. It's probably about in here. And there's one to the right of it. And then there's a nice, beautiful angle. There's a lot of wonderful chaos back in here. And it's going to be a lot of fun to do that. Now, this ground is about here. Okay. And probably that way, kind of. And then we're going to have some shadows coming in here. Mass hair, mask foliage right in here. Little tree back behind, I see. One there, one there. I'm not going to do much more because I'm going to let the paint do the work. Up now, where's this hole kind of up in this vicinity? That's all I'm going to do because I don't want to. I have no clean edges that I want to paint against. So I'm going to take my initial brush that I use, this old scrub brush. I'm going to take a little bit of my asphaltum and blue, and we're going to start in with some of those nice rich darks. And we're just going to, but I want them in thin because I want to be able to come over them. So with that in mind, we're going to start up in here. Down in here. Now that's a little above what we would call midpoint. And if some of this color comes through, it's going to be just fine because this is a real nice neutral color. Sometimes, I mean, there are artists that love to have the real bright colors coming through. I feel much more confident with kind of a neutral colors simply because then I can change it the way I want if I want to. But, you know, sometimes it's fun to just pick some bright colors and do that. Now there's a tree trunk here. There's a little bit of a trunk here, and then this is all kind of foliage, so I brought a little bit more blue in. It feels about right, about the right spot. The faster I get all of this laid in, the sooner I can get into making it work. So there, we're going to bring this on over here. Bring a little bit more blue. I brought a little bit of a burnt sienna back into that. Now it's thinner now. A lot more washy. Hopefully that's going to sink into the canvas pretty quick. It's got a gesso base on it. And because it's got a gesso base, I hope that it'll absorb into it. Now if this were oil primed, it would not dry very quickly. And your paint is automatically going to stay much more wet because it is not being absorbed. And there are many folks who love that. And I do from time to time. In fact, I like to switch off. Probably have mentioned that several times as I've painted, that I'm one of these individuals that I don't have a tried and true method. I have methods that I improvise as I paint, depending on how everything feels. And nice dark mass up in here. Where is that? Right about in here. Okay. So a little bit more asphalt and a little bit more blue. Probably I'm going to need a little more asphaltum on here, and I'm just about out. So I'm probably going to end up throwing in some of my, I have some Van Dyke brown over there I just picked up. I might throw that in. That's close. It's not as warm as asphaltum. And we get one of the tree trunks coming about there. This one is a little closer, right about in here. Now, you see how that wasn't making a mark? Paint was too dry. I had already used a lot of the paint on the brush. Now it's wetter. See the difference? About midpoint, right about here, we get that diagonal tree kind of breaking up. And these are, you know, and I use this word a heck of a lot, and that is placeholders. These are placeholders because I'm not positive that's exactly where I'm going to keep it. Little drip. And they're pretty much the same color, same value, almost everywhere. One of the cool things about painted foliage is you can kind of really be super free. And if you've watched when I paint architecture, you have to be much more mindful of accuracy. So, got a really good friend of mine, is just a fabulous, I won't give any names out in case they're listening, who's a fabulous landscape artist, who once told me that they didn't want to paint trees, architecture. And I went, why? He says, well, then I have to draw, which is true. So you can be a lot freer when you do stuff like this. Just 1, 2, third one about in here. A lot of scrubby stuff in here. Some darker stuff kind of coming down. So we have kind of some of the groundwork in there. I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to kind of get the base a lot thinner. You can really see the thin. I may play with a lot of thin to thick in this, which could be really fun. More so than I do in other areas. Right now, everything's quite thin, brushy. Lose things. Lose edges, find edges. It's a great, wonderful, wonderful exercise. Now I'm going to paint kind of this kind of burnt sienna color. Same brush, didn't clean it. Burnt sienna white, added right to that color that I was using. Burnt sienna, a little asphaltum in there because I don't want it to be too red. Let's see what this looks like. That's probably a little stronger than I want, so maybe I'll mix a little green to it. Green, being the complement of red, will always tone it down. Not enough. Probably too much this time, but let's see. A little too much. I don't mind it. Oh, I kind of like some of the effects I'm getting. Just, they're very accidental. Remember that happy accident line that you've probably heard and maybe have used? Some of that is coming from the simple fact that it's I'm painting into very terpy, washy kind of paint. Constantly remixing colors, by the way. Every time you see me take my brush down, I'm not necessarily just picking up paint. Sometimes I'm adding a little red, sometimes a little green, sometimes a little ochre. And what that'll do is it'll give me a nice color base so that I don't have a specific color that I'm married to. Going back to some of the darker colors, because I'm seeing some of that happen up in here. I think I mentioned one time there was a wonderful landscape artist who I thought was very, very abstract type of landscape, but really nice stuff. Unfortunately, passed away too young. A guy named Ted Goshner. One of the things that we were talking at a show, one of the Pepper Tree shows that I was in one time, and he was explaining his opinion of painting very loose and almost abstract landscapes. And he said he felt it was more difficult because you have to make decisions where the more realistic you go, the more you're really trying to just portray 100% of what's in front of you. And when you're going more abstracted, you have to think more about the kind of strokes you're deciding to leave, how they work with everything. And so it's an interesting concept. I actually gained a lot from that little talk, and obviously I use a lot of what I learned from other artists, not only when I paint, but when I teach. And I think all artists do. In fact, was it a weekend or so ago, the Academy of Art had a graduation, and we gave an honorary doctorate to Mr. Tom Marsh, just an exceptional realist sculpture, traditional. And he made an interesting comment that the people he studied under, and he mentioned his name, I don't recall who it was, in Italy, had studied under another artist who had studied under sculptor, who had studied under Rodin, Auguste Rodin. And he said, so in essence, anything I am telling you has been filtered down through other artists, and you're getting opinions and comments from Rodin. So those of us that have learned from people who have learned from other masters, being they living or dead, we're actually conveying a lot of their messages and a lot of their learnings down to other people. And you got to remember, we're all painters and sculptors, all artists are recipients of great trial and error and learned experiences from many of the, you can say, masters or near masters and fellow artists. We're all kind of in that club. I like that. I believe in that actually quite a bit. And my mentors, which tended to be three or fourfold. I never consider that I emulated any one of my mentors, but I had wonderful mentors. I had Don Putman, who I've mentioned many times, who really taught me about color and painting. Joe Henniger, who studied at École Beaux-Arts in France, and Reynold Brown, just a superb master draftsman, illustrator. I also had the good fortune of working with Lorser Feidelson, who, oh my God, he studied under so many great, I can't even, and a couple of the guys that were friends with, I want to say Degas, I don't mean Degas, I mean the famous realist, come on, his name just escaped me, Dali, Salvador Dali. So, and you know, they all picked up little tidbits from as we all do, we pick up little tidbits from various artists, and I always say, you know, what my friend Dan Gouze used to say is, to steal from many is research. To steal from one is plagiarism. And that's what we're all stealing from many. And, you know, they probably did too. You know, they all learned. I mean, Sargent looked at all kinds of people. Who did Rembrandt look like? I'm not sure. But I'm sure that there were influences. Even subconscious influences. It's not always obvious. Okay, so let's start to get some of this kind of in-between color. And it's kind of ochre, a little bit of green. So I'm taking I clean my brush a little bit, but not a lot. Taking ochre and Naples yellow light. Let me try that. I want a little warmer. More ochre, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna into it this time. Let me kind of go through the palette that I'm working with here. I have a little bit of cad yellow hue laid out because I figure I was going to need it later. Then I have titanium white, yellow, Naples yellow, yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, which I just picked up because I want a little bit warmer feel in here. Ultramarine blue, sap green, asphaltum, burnt sienna. Pretty simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colors and a little bit of yellow. I am not I think I've probably mentioned it before, I'm not a huge proponent of laying out 30 colors. Yet I don't want to put it down because I do know really good artists who do. I don't. For me, it confuses the issue. So I purposely do not put out a little bit of white down here. That many colors. If I need them, I add them. That's the difference. I don't do it in the beginning, but if I do need it, by God, I'll add it, trust me. So I'm taking a little green to that color now. And its green is darkening it, so I'm adding a little bit of Naples back into it. Oh, that's pretty good. We want it kind of smudged. I don't want to lay it on too perfect of a stroke. It's really, things are very diffused as we move back into that arena. Added a little bit more green because I can see some of the green. Oh, that's a good color. By gosh. I like it when I do something and it works. You know, it's less than 50% of the time, in case you're wondering. At least that's a guesstimate, but I think that's about right. I don't know how often. I mean, when I say that, I mean on your first crack at it. You know, because it takes sometimes 2 or 3 cracks to get it just where you want it. I kind of figure if I'm wrong, it's kind of cool in the beginning because I can use that later. I just threw a little bit more ochre and I'm standing back. I know you can't see me, but I just stood back because I wanted to get a feel for how it's working. And I'll report back to you that I think it's working fine. Not always. Now I'm going to take some brown and some green together, a little darker, because I see some darker areas. That's a little too green. Throw a little bit more of the asphaltum into it. Still a little bit too much. If it stays too much, then what I do is I throw the burnt sienna, which is a warmer, and that'll definitely kill the green if I get it too strong. Okay. You want to give the feeling, and that's, I paint for the feeling first, then paint for your refinement or details later. I think that's actually a pretty good piece of advice, is you want to start off with the feeling and then add in whatever details you feel are necessary. Or you can call them details, you can call them refinement. That's literally up to you. You can move things. This way, if I'm wrong, I can move things around. Right? Like I think I've got that over too far to the left. So I can go back really quickly with some blue and brown, asphaltum, and just kind of pop a little bit of the foliage back over it. So now I've moved it to the right. All right? Little things like that can make a big difference. Go back to that kind of green. I'm seeing little pieces right about in here. Just letting the brush kind of barely, I almost can't feel it touch the canvas. And I definitely do not want to repeat the same stroke. And if there's one problem that I see with a lot of times beginning painters is they repeat that same stroke over and over and over again. And what you want to do is have a variety. Variety is the spice of life. You ever hear that line? It's true in painting. So far, it's kind of fun. I don't know how successful it is, but it's fun. So I want to run some of this off the page. I really kind of blew that when I started it. Just about going through my first rag. So I added a little bit more blue and brown, and we'll come in. I kind of like some of the transparency that's occurring up in here. A little bit more up in the corner. And you see it, sometimes I push the brush down harder. Sometimes I'm just letting just the tip of that brush strike it. There. The density and the abstraction is feeling somewhat like this feels, which is pretty much what I'm after right now. You know, that's why, if you notice, I didn't draw a lot. I drew somewhat, but I didn't draw a lot, because literally so much of it was just edge control and value and a little bit of color shift. And so that's really how I want to start this thing, with those three factors occurring. Now, every now and then I'm standing back, just stood back again. I think it's important for you guys to note that, because I think, again, I've said many times, I think it's a mistake that a lot of people don't make. And when I'm outside, I even stand back probably even more when I'm painting on location. I just don't, you know, you can look at it a lot of different ways. I'm going to tell you, I don't trust myself, my personal judgment. I think sometimes I can judge it so much better when I step back a little bit. Okay, like I've said many, many times, I think you judge your brush strokes from where you're painting. You judge your painting, the overall feel of your painting, from back behind. So we're going to come a little lighter in here. So I've already ended up with 3 or 4 colors and values in this area. And that's what makes it rich, because it's not a color. It's made up of just a variety of different kinds of colors. And we got to get a little sky in there in a second. Stepping back, okay. I kind of, the marks are working, the values are okay, and the colors are pretty good. Now I'm going to put a little bit of that sky in. Where's that sky going to be? It's going to be similar to that value. And I think I'm going to use the same brush, although it's getting pretty dirty and dark. So I'm cleaning it a little bit here. Okay. Once I've cleaned it, I'm going to grab some white and a little blue. And I've still got residue of other colors in that brush, because I haven't thoroughly cleaned it. But we're going to check. I think I'm going to go a little whiter than I just, there we go. Let's try this. Maybe a touch of Naples to it, huh? And where do we see the blue? We see a patch right here. We see a patch right about there. Okay, now, it didn't, when I put that stroke down, it felt dry. So that means I need to add some medium. Not terp this time, medium, because I'm painting on paint. A little more white, a little more Naples as it comes right down to the looks like it's lighter down here. And that's why I added the white and the Naples. A little bit, mix a little more of that blue back into it. I don't see any filtering over here. I see it all here. I see another little patch up about in here. Kind of works its way up. A little bit more blue. A little bit more of the Naples in the white. As it comes down, Naples in the white, way down here. Right about there. And a little bit here. Maybe a little peek through into some of those trees, just a little bit. Filters. Stepping back. Okay. Abstractly, it's working. Color and value tends to feel okay. And that's literally the first mark that I really want to hit. Color and value. Color, value, and nice strokes. Some of those nice strokes I'm going to leave. Some of them I'm going to correct. Because they may be nice, but they're wrong. That's actually a good line that I just used there. They may be right. They may be nice strokes, but they're wrong. Don't sacrifice because you love an area. I did this as a student quite often. I'd fall in love with what that good old happy accident line, and I would leave an area in a painting that didn't work because I loved the certain characteristics of that. And I learned after, don't be afraid to wipe things out. You know, more happy accidents will occur. So we're about 25 minutes into it. Let me stand back real quick. Okay, starting to make sense. I have a lot more to do in here in these areas. I see little pieces of blue and kind of sneaking right, kind of works its way down here, right down in here. Got to pick up some medium. Every time I'm putting that brush down in that area, what's happening is I'm picking up some of that pigment, some of that dirty brown pigment. And so a little bit of dirt doesn't hurt. I didn't rehearse that line. It just rhymed. Okay. Now, I had about 3 or 4 images I was going to paint from, and I let Anna pick. And she said, well, you haven't done anything quite like that before. I don't think I have. I may have done some similar things, but nothing quite as chaotic. The feeling is starting. Now, I've got some kind of gray-green, so I'm going to take some ochre, mix it right in the color I was using. So I really haven't done a lot of brush cleaning when I've been doing this. So we're going to kind of come down right about here. We want to see where this is, right about here. And maybe a little light in here. And then warmer, I can see it. So I'm adding, when I'm going warmer, generally what I'm adding is the burnt sienna. But I also have alizarin I can add if I want to. There's a log coming through, really neat. Hopefully I'll be able to put a little bit of that in. I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to get in, but I'll get a little bit of it. Little pieces of warmth flicker through every now and then back in here. But you really can't press. They're almost accidental movements. Stepping back. It's got a good abstract feel. Normally I'm not that happy this early. Let's just hope it doesn't peak now and I kind of falter towards the end, because that has happened. We're going to put a little piece of bark coming off it right here. Okay, right there. So let's there's some warmth that's very similar, and for that I'm going to take the ochre, I'm going to take burnt sienna, maybe a little of the geez, is that about right? That's pretty close. Oh, I'm sorry. A little of the Naples yellow. Take a little bit more burnt sienna, bring it in right about in here. And I see it kind of filtering up kind of in here a little bit. And we want to get it on the ground. Kind of smudges up into this realm right in here. And we go back to the base burnt sienna, and we kind of, or the base color I was using, bring it over, bring it down, get a little bit of the chaos. What that is there's leaves and bark and stuff on the ground. Now this is going to need to come down a little bit. I can see right now. So this is kind of an underpainting. I'm just kind of scrubbing in here, okay? Color and value feel okay. This definitely needs to come down. So you take that same brush, paper towel number 2, we just killed it. And let's bring that color down just a little bit. right? Comes down here. The brown and the blue. Asphaltum, ultramarine. Gives me nice rich darks. I'm getting some nice scuff marks. The way the brush is making marks, it's depositing little areas that I probably couldn't have planned, but it's working. Okay, that feels better. I like that downward slant a little bit. Now, I'm going to get a little bit of that greenery in there at the very base. Then I'll have, for lack of a better word, I'll have the lay-in done. Just barely 30 minutes in, so that feels actually good. Remember, I'm removing this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some of this color and bring it down a little further. Bring it down just a little bit further. Okay. Now we're going to take the grass, not the shadows, but the grass. And we're going to take the green, the ochre, and the maples together. Let me see what that looks like. So a little, whoop, that's better. I had too much green in that first stroke. Let's just kind of get some greenery in here. A little too pale, so a little green, a little bit more green, a little bit more I'm going to go a little darker, a little bit more green, and maybe a little bluer over on the side where the shadows are. Not going to put too much in, just a few things like that. Leave it alone. Okay, we'll get more going on later. I know what I can really pop that in at the end and probably make it work. And that, my friends, is experience talking. The more paintings you do, the more you're going to realize, well, I can let that go and come in at the end if I need to. All right. So I'm going to start going with this a little bit of a smaller brush. Let's go with this number 8 flat. This is wonderful. And we're going to start to pop a little bit more light into it. Yellow and ochre and white and medium. That looks pretty good. It might be almost a little too light. I'm going to throw a little bit of a, there we go. I threw a little bit of a burnt sienna into that color. Now I went a little too dark, and so I threw just pure white right into that color. Put a piece of light on that tree, and then this tree over to the left, same thing, except it's got more red in it, and it comes right here. Moves its way down. A little bit of a branch happening right there. Let that go down. Now, as this goes up, it disappears, and then it finds itself again, right about in here. That's a little too, I threw a little too much in there. Now, those little pieces of light literally is light hitting on branches or foliage. So I could take my lighter color, come in on that edge if I want it a little bit lighter. And same here at the top, very top of that. Gets a little, now I've destroyed some of the stuff in the background, fine. Right now, let stuff like that happen, okay? I really recommend that. Let things occur. Sometimes mistakes in a painting like this can actually work for you. So I went back to more of the burnt sienna. We're going to come up in here. And there's a lot of foliage over it. So the foliage I will put on top. Why? Because that's where it is. If I put it in too soon, I'm just going to destroy it. I got too much light up there, I can tell you right now. So I'm going back to my brown with a little bit of burnt sienna into it, and we're going to kind of come in, overlap a little bit. And down below where it's a little darker, more of a little filtered light in here. Same up in here, some foliage coming over. Okay, because you can lose it with foliage. Now, one of the areas that I knew initially that I was gonna have to put some care into is this area, the shadow part of that tree. Since this tree is really the focal point of the painting. And there's a lot of stuff back in the shadows here. The textures, really. So I've got that beautiful wet paint down there, so I can actually go in, paint into it a little, probably too light, and then come back over it and just hit it with a clean stroke. And in doing so, back in here, some light over in here, up here, little pieces. And then we get some nice stronger light right over on that side, right about here. Got it. You have to have enough medium in your paint at this point. I'm saying that because if you don't have enough medium, you're going to push it into the paint. It's just going to turn ugly on you. So you just want to be able to lay this paint on top. Hey, let me step back. Yeah, it feels okay. I think I need to widen it down at the base a little bit, but it doesn't feel off. So we're going to put a little bit more light up right about in here where I see it. Sneaks down. Now, gets a little grayer. That's one of the beauties about eucalyptus. You can get beautiful warms and cools right about in this region, right about there, right about here. So I mixed up, basically took some asphaltum and green and mixed it back up into the brown I already had. A little bit up in here. And this is the kind of stuff, honestly, that you can really have fun with the longer you want to spend on something. Now, if you're painting quickly on location, you're just going to have to be really indicative and not put it all in there and just decide what it is you want to put in and what you're going to leave out. So the same color in my brush. It's a little dirty, which I want it. Comes out here. Some of this is just bark coming out. And then we get a lot of really nice rusty colors right underneath, right about it. Oh, that looks good. I just took basically burnt sienna with, mixed it right into that kind of ochre color I was using. There. Now it needs to come over. This could lighten up a little bit because even though it's in shadow, it has some pretty good color into it. And it's right there. And there. I'm going to keep an eye on my time. I generally do that when I paint outside too, you guys, so it's not, as I keep a close watch on the, sounding like Johnny Cash song, I keep on the time frame. Okay. Now, there's a really interesting piece of bark, and it's kind of dirty, and it sticks out right here. So I'm going to kind of pull a little bit of it right about there, and it fades, and then it gets light on the very end, and right about there. Okay. Working okay. I gotta get enough in so I can really start to come in with the foliage. That's where I'm lacking now. That dark's a little too dark. We want to bring this out, up, and over. And then some cooler tones right in here. Warmer tones back in here. Okay. I'm saving that. But I am going to pick some white and some Naples and put it back into that light color I was using, kind of this kind of color. But I'm going to go a little whiter. and a lot of medium. And we're going to start with this and see where we're at. That's a little, probably a little lighter than I want. Maybe I'm going to throw a little yellow into it. Probably have too neat of a brush. I'd rather do it with this brush where it's a little bit more chaotic. We'll kind of come in, hit some brights. This kind of brights are going to happen right on that tree too. White and Naples and medium. White, Naples, and medium, and whatever residue I still have in the brush, which is probably a little green, which is okay. Now, some of this stuff would be really nice if I do have the time at the end to come in with a knife, because you can really scrape some of this stuff on. A little bit of light right here, down in here. This is what I call scuffing. Here's what I mean by that. What you're doing is you're just letting the brush hit and kind of skip. So it's not hitting flat. Now I'm standing back. So the texture's working. The texture's working okay. Bring a little bit more white into that color and a little more medium, because I can feel it getting a little dry and sticky. I don't want to have to press hard. I change the way I hold the brush sometimes. So sometimes I'll hold it this way, and sometimes I'll hold it this way. But most of the strokes are pretty horizontal at this point, because that's pretty much the ground plane. Every now and then you get a little bit of something happening. So we've scuffed that ground up. So I'm going to take that same color while I've got it, and I'm going to put it down here, even though I'm going to go brighter still. Right down here at the very bottom of that tree. That's working. But I'm not going to go further on it right now, because I know I can put that in at the last minute and make it work. Right, if I spend all my time on it now, I still have a lot of area up in here to deal with. So I kind of want to use my time wisely. And I keep referring to the fact that if I were doing this plein air, and that's the way I paint, I don't paint any different plein air than I do a studio. The only difference when I do a full-on studio painting is I spend more time. I'm able to go back into it a lot more. That's it. That's literally it. It's just, you have more time to go in and fix things. For plein air, I just do it, cross my fingers, hope for the best, and, simplify would be, if I were to use one word and keep that word true, it would be simplify. Now we get little pieces of light filtering through back, and I just took and added, I got to put more medium into it, but it's basically a little bit of the burnt sienna thrown back into that color. Okay, I don't like this dark here. Got to do something about that. Let's bring this plane over a little bit. Okay, I think I'll brighten up that. Just all I have to do is, see, I got a nice edge on that brush. So if I just barely touch it down, it'll do the work for me. I see I went too far with it, but I can also take a brush and make it narrower. I used to see artists sometimes, like, how did they get that beautiful stroke? And I finally realized that what they did is they put it in kind of clumsy and then just went back and neatened it up, which is kind of what I just did there. That's a little too light. All right, let's go back into these trees. I'm going to take that reddish white color, and we're going to go right about here, pop a little bit of light, probably a little lighter than I needed. and down below it. A little bit of dapple in here, a little bit of light right up there. Not much. Now, I've got to hit that other tree in there. Little piece of light back here. Fuzz it. Little pieces of light, a little darkened. I threw some asphaltum back into that color. But as this goes down, don't want to go that dark. Every now and then, we're going to pick up on this tree a little piece of light. Right about here. Down in here. And then a little darker still. Okay, we got light filtering through. Now let's go back into these trees. Right in here, I think one thing I kind of obliterated was the diagonal tree. So I'm going back to my blue and my brown, a little bit of terp into that, and we're going to kind of, it comes this way, it comes, overlaps. Good. Right up there, up to that point. And if I need to neaten up these trees now, I can go back while I've got this color and clarify. A little bit more foliage. You got to go back and forth with that foliage as much as you can, as much as time will allow. You got a little light coming through down in here between these trees, right about there. Down maybe in here a little bit. There. So what we're doing is we're separating the trees. I do see a bright light on a trunk of a tree, which is right about there. Too light. Too thick, too. So we take this once again, chisel it down, and put a little bit of a shadow here and there over it, and then there's a little bit of light, so I'm going to a little bit of light way down here, right dividing. I destroyed that one tree with that one stroke, so let's put that tree back in right here. And there's a tree that comes over here, and there's a lot of interesting gobbledygook. How many of you guys have ever heard that term, gobbledygook? Right back in here. And it helps define and we get some foliage happening, lighter foliage. It's intermixing with the color that I'm using, which is perfectly all right because I don't want it real bright. So for me, it's just fine to do that. Okay, so a little dense right here. I can feels a little dense. So take a little of that background. Right about this point, it's going to come down. We're going to divide that up just a little bit. Okay, so we're painting negatives. Positive, negative, positive, negative. A little bit of right behind, we got it down low, and we want to divide these two trees. And this can come over further. Take that red color and we'll bring it down about here. And let's see where we're at time-wise. Well, I've got about 40 minutes, maybe a little more, but about that. So I'm feeling like, okay, I've got enough time to kind of worry about things up in here. Let's get a little bit of the light. You can't ignore it. As much as I'd like to go back and fuss on this, I've got to get enough of the other stuff in to make it feel convincing. A little bit of light on a tree back behind. A little too much light. So you take the brown, the asphalt come in, get rid of it. And that's where we're gonna take my big brush. Where'd it go? I thought I had two of them. Probably do, but I'll live with one. How's that? Okay. I know what I want to do. Back in here, right at this point, I'm going to slow down a little bit. I'm going to be a little more accurate. So this tree, this ant tree at a diagonal, has a little light on it. Right here. And there is a log. It comes out from behind that tree. A little bit brighter light on it. There. And then a little bit warmer and redder. This has a cast shadow across it, so I'm leaving that shadow. It's starting to work. A little piece of light right here. A little bit greenery. Back here. Some brighter light in the background. Sometimes those little strokes that I'm just adding right there. Now I've really condensed this from where it is here, but those little tiny strokes counter the big clumsy strokes and really add some interesting, I don't know any other way to say it, kind of a counter to that big brushy abstract area that you're doing in there. So we're going to clean that edge up, get a secondary shadow coming across. And there's some foliage, so a little bit of green. It's a little too bold, but right in front of it. And this is what you add as you build, as you keep going back into it, go further and further. You keep going back and you add more density, more information within some of those shadow areas. There is a light, so I can go back. I'm gonna use a knife now. I'm gonna go back with the knife, pick up some ochre, kind of a dirty ochre color, and what I'm gonna try and do is find it. And we're gonna find it right here, and it's gonna disappear, and then it's gonna come out again right about in here. Okay. And little touches. Too much of this really wrecks the painting, but a little bit goes a long way. There's a little bit of it's darker, and it's another piece of light right about in there. And then we get some breaking across. Now, I'm going to play with all this crummy foliage at the top because this is going to take some time. But let's start to get some of this stuff in here. I'm going to take my crummy brush. I call it my gesso brush. A little bit of medium in it. Maybe a little asphaltum. Maybe a little burnt sienna. See where we're at? Maybe a little darker. I don't want to go that light that fast. Let's let the lights emerge. Now, this time I'm using terp and not medium. The reason being, I really don't want to have to press. And these are those kind of scuff marks that I mentioned. And you got to make them different directions. You basically look at what you're painting. I'm looking at the redder undercolors. I'm not looking at the bright lights on top. Because there is, as I've mentioned, I've used this word density to the foliage. So the foliage isn't just a color or a light color on top. It's many light colors. Throw a little bit more red into it this time. A little bit more medium. Press down on that brush and got some of the dirt out of it. So my color, whoa, see when you get too much terp? I don't want quite that much of a strength right now. A little bit more. That's over in here. Now I want to look carefully. How far over does that come? Right about in here. So we want to get some of that undergrowth before I really get some of the, sometimes the little marks I'm making will make a branch or two, make it feel like I'm painting a branch or two. A little bit more rust. Rust meaning burnt sienna. So I get some nice variations of different colors. Some more intense, some duller. But that's what will set up and make this whole thing hopefully work at the very end. Now, well, I've got this knife. Look at, you got this wonderful little, didn't work. Didn't have enough pigment on it. Let's try it again. And if this doesn't work all the time, I will use a liner. But the knife will give you a different kind of a mark. And the richness. There's some really light right about in, looks to me right about in here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the sky color and mix it in with that. And just kind of, I'm going to take some Naples. And some of these really light. But before I do, I just noticed more branches. Okay, let's start to get some of the lighter foliage in. I'm going to take Naples and I'm going to mix it into the color I was using with some terp and a little medium, but I'm going to test first. I'm going to throw some yellow into it and a little white and a little terp and a little medium. So it's got to be so I can put it down without struggling. I've got to be able to just kind of brush really lightly and get it to sit. There's some really nice green colors. Now, if you have the opportunity and you're doing a studio painting, you can go back when it's dry and really add a lot. I'm going to pick up a little green now because I see back on this side of this tree. A little too much green, so I threw a little bit more burnt sienna back into that. Some of the stuff I just overlooked. And I can brighten it up a little bit. I think it's kind of bright back in here. Okay, so let's take some white and some yellow and into that green. The white and the yellow are really dry, so I have to add a lot of medium and terp to it. But we want to get really bright with it down in here. Trying not to pick on individual leaves, trying to give the mass feel of the leaf, but without over picking and getting individual leaves. So I'm just letting the brush, the way the brush goes down, do the work. Now, it wasn't depositing the paint well. Let's step back. Okay, it's happening, right? It's happening, but it stops too abruptly right here. It needs to kind of come down and overlap. Now, so I'm going to keep another brush handy. This number 8. I've only used about three or four brushes, by the way. which is kind of unusual for me. It lets me be a little bit more precise. That's all. Don't want to get too precise because I could really mess it up. I'm going to take that bright and we're going to try and bring that there. Nope. Try it one more time. Way too heavy-handed, way too clumsy. So what do? Chop it down so it looks nice and narrow. Okay, some nice bright lights up in here. A lot of them back in here. We can go back. This comes down. A little bit of overlapping here. More density in here as far as lightness goes. Not dark density, light density. I use the word density for both sometimes, and so I can get very confusing if someone's watching me, because unless I correct myself. Get that bright light back in there. And then there are branches that overlap that. So I'm going to grab my liner, which I had handy. This is probably the fourth brush I'm using. And we're going to add a couple of little strokes in here that are basically little branches that are overlapping that. You can't always paint around everything. So sometimes you have to literally go back and do that, like in here. I need to kind of go back and add a little bit more dark. Don't always like to do it with a small brush, but in this case, if I make the tip like this, not like that, then I can kind of use that whole part of the brush and do some really interesting things. And then I can go back with the same brush and add in. There's foliage that sticks out here, so we can kind of get it to, if I use the brush right, come in and overlap. That feels better. It helps define this part of the tree on top of it. Now, as long as I got this in my hand, let's clean it, add some white, and go back into that Naples, really light. See what we can do here. I'll do some with the knife, some with the brush. So it's very easy to get too thick of a stroke in here. So that's generally why I use the knife, is the knife will give me more of that knife edge type of a stroke. But it's got to be wet enough on the edge of your brush, or of your knife, so you can make a mark. Sometimes you can get 2 or 3. Not always. And you're just building. What you really want to do is build until you get the right combination of branches, foliage, color variation, all of that going on. That line, we got a little branch right in here. We got some brighter lights back here. Got another little branch sneaking in about there. Another one about in here. That one got some down here. And that's what you use that knife for things like that. And then when you want to plow some paint down, those are the two times the knife works. When you really want to lay some bold strokes down, or if you want to remove some stuff, scrape it. I'm looking at what I'm doing and being a little bit kind of scuffy and abrupt with it. Now, there's a little bit, where are we at? Oh, I'm in pretty good shape, 25 minutes. So I got all this to deal with. This is okay. I don't feel great about it. I feel like I need to kind of come back and hit some darks here and there, because you're never painting one direction. You're never just painting forward, so to speak, where you're just adding paint. Sometimes or adding things, I should say, not paint. But sometimes you're subtracting things. That's an important thing to take note of. A lot of times it's what you take out, not what you put in. So that went a little too strong. So we just get rid of part of it. Okay. Now, there's a little bit going on up in here, a little bit over in here, and a little bit of green foliage. Not much, but a little bit, right? Here, up here, a lot up in that one region. And I put it in earlier. Not enough. Need a little bit bolder, a little ochre. Be careful not to just polka dot it. Doing stuff like this. Okay, example. I'm going to give you an example of something I don't like and how you might fix it. I am going to take a big brush. I don't like that brush. Let me grab another, see what we got brush-wise here that I can utilize. Let's take this one. I'm going to smear. And it kind of throws things a little out of focus. And since they're hanging, it contributes to that part of the character that you're really striving for, is kind of that hanging. Then you go back, don't stay with one, and go back and add more. You need a little bit more precision here and there. You add your precision in. And I can see it get a little warmer. And this is what I will do very often, right up in here. So I'm going to take the burnt sienna, and we're going to kind of, and then I'll come back over it. Not as bright as I wanted. I want a little stronger. There we go. So as I stand back, it's feeling better. I can feel where it needs some darks, and we just chew back and forth. So the effect is starting to get there. Is it exactly what I want? Absolutely not. So let's go back down in here. Then we're going to come up in here with a lot more little branches, and I might use both the knife and the brush. For example, the brush, I'm going to just, there, really good, down here maybe. Put more. build that density. Okay, a couple things. We want to get this in. We want to really start to light that tree. All right, so we're going to go in. We're going to do the shadows in the grass. I'm going to take the green, a little bit of blue, and mix it into the kind of green color I already had. And I'm going to look for where those shadows are on the grass. And we're going to take one, bring it about here, which is what I see there. Now it's going to change color when it moves under the earth. Okay, so now we're going to switch it to a warm color because it's on a warmer surface. Probably a little darker. No, it's pretty similar in value. I don't want to go too warm with it, so I want to keep it enough blue in it so you let the sky, and we're going to kind of come in there. That feels pretty good. That might, now I'm going to have to stand back to see how it actually feels. And where I see the shadow meeting, that's where I'm going to see, like in here. And I can see shadows raking across. I see some really interesting things. I kind of missed some of the character. And I see it, I'll tell you where I see it right here. And I can see it on the log. And I'm just mimicking kind of the direction that the shadows are going on that log. And might have one that goes a little longer, maybe back into here. But I'm going to go back to the greens, and we're going to, these shadows are coming this way. So it starts to feel correct. So I can amplify those shadows in two ways. Number one, on the ground plane. So I'm going to pick up white and ochre and medium. Much the same. And we're going to, maybe a little bit more ochre. How's that? A little bit more. There we go. So we're making those shadows stand out just a little bit more. Sometimes I like to, on that ground, not just make it, but add a little green to the white. Because I can see it. I see it get a little greener. So it's a matter of just taking the white, mixing it into the same color I was using, and adding just a tad of green to it. And you can make the ground plane feel a hell of a lot more convincing. Let's go really bright back here. Now, I'm going to do the same with the grass. I'm going to take the green, I'm going to take the yellow, and a little bit of ochre, and I'm going to test this. It's pretty good. I'm going to maybe a little more ochre and a little bit more maples into it, and we're going to kind of Let me step back for a second. Yeah, it's working okay. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes. So I want to get back into that tree. Remember, that's what I said is our focal point, our star. So I do want to give it enough character, enough attention, so that it doesn't feel like I've abandoned it. So I've been very abbreviated in this area. But it feels pretty much like shadows. So while I've got this brush in hand, I'm going to really clean that brush. The main reason I want to go, I'm going to have to add some light down here, but I want to go bright. So I want to clean the brush as best I can, really. I'm going to pick up white and Naples on a new spot on my palette. A lot of medium, because that was real dry. Maybe a little bit more Naples. Okay. Let me stand back. Yeah, I'm getting the light. I'm not getting as much of the tree in here as I need, so I'm going to need some in-between tones. So we'll get a little bit more light on those right in there where I kind of hit it once. So now I'm going to come back and hit it again a little stronger. And as it transitions is where I really need, whoops, a little too far with it. Where it transitions into those shadow tones is what I really need to amplify just a little bit more. Particularly right in here, I can see it get a little brighter. So I mixed up the right color, but I didn't have enough medium in it, so it's not sticking really well. So let's push it now. There we go. A little bit back in here. And throw a little bit, lighten it a little bit of my light color, maybe the ground plane color into it, and we'll get a little bit better transition right here. A little bit more of the ground plane color. Want a little lighter. Got to stand back. Okay, it's working. Now, there's some other areas back in here where I can begin to see detail. I didn't look for it earlier, but I begin to see a branch back in the shadows, right about here. And then I see a couple of light, not real light. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to mix kind of the light color and the warm color back into that kind of shadowy color that I just used here. We're going to have a couple little... See, so it isn't vacant. And one of the things some people do is they'll take a big mass like this and see it as a big mass and not see into it. I want to see into it enough that it feels believable. And then there's a little bit more light happening right. I'm not happy with the knife quality. So I think what I need to do is switch over to a brush. A little bit of dappled light back in there. So now I'm going to revisit this area over here. See what I like, what I don't like. I'm going to clean up a little bit of light on that tree right there. And as it comes up higher, above this, get a little light right there. And a little light below it. And then way up top, look at way up top, you get some light sneaking through on this tree up in here. This is some of those cool little abstract marks you can throw into a painting and make it really feel neat. Now, one thing I like to do also at the very end, towards the end, and we're nearing completion. Let's see what else I need here. I've got that. We got a little light on that. I want to go back with the sky. The blue, I'm mixing up a new color. Blue, it's pretty easy. Blue, white, and Naples are basically the three colors I was using for the sky. Get a lot of medium in it, and just look carefully. Where else do I see? Do I see a little activity? Sometimes a bigger splotch. Most of the times it's little picky stuff. You got to be very careful not to overpick. That would be the one area I would advise people to. Now, two little spots that look like polka dots, so I'm going to go in and loosen it up a little bit by just holding that brush differently. Just start to break it up a little bit more in here, a little bit in here, right above to separate the two trees here. Up in there, we've already got that. Down in here a little bit more. Back. You gotta stand back right there. What I let my eye do is I let my eye go around the whole painting. If an area looks wrong to me, then I look at my reference and I say, did I do something wrong? Or if I see, geez, I can add a little bit more and really make it work. And that's what I do as we're approaching completion. You don't want to do that too soon. But there comes a point when you need to kind of step back and say, just look at your painting, forget the reference. Is there anything that bothers me in the painting? If there is, look back at your reference. Look back at your reference. Try and figure out what it is that you need to do to fix it. Because there are always going to be problems. And it's just a matter of a combination of time and knowledge as to what you're going to do to remedy some of those problems that tend to bother you. So I saw back here, got a little brighter. So I'm picking up a brighter color with a lot more medium. And I'm building more texture there. Down here. Right there. Maybe a little bit, I want that to come back here a little bit. So what you're doing is we're building textures into some of these areas. Like back in here, I probably didn't go as light as I needed to. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of a bigger brush, more ochre, more white. So I'm a lot lighter, a little medium, and we're going to test it. Yep, about right there. Maybe a little yellow into that. Maybe a little yellow, a little white. Oh, and I see a couple of branches. Oh, really nice. Kind of working their way down. Really, any of those little touches that you can add in are going to help. I see another one right there. And we'll take that nice bright color I was just using with the yellow. And as it goes over here, I thought I had enough colors into that. And I did, I just didn't have the value as light as it could be, so it would really sit back. So I'm just painting this back into those colors. Stepping back, the whole thing is starting to make a little bit of sense. I want to add, I think I mentioned I might do this in towards the end. I'm going to take my knife, add a lot more. Just because I see I can push it. And I knew that towards the end I might be doing this. Give it texture so it doesn't look too spotty. That's sometimes you go down with it, sometimes across. Same over in here. Every now and then you get a little pull of a weed. You pick up little pieces, you can just, and I could play back with even green back in there. Same value, so I'm taking white, mixing it back into one of those greens that I had. So it's the same value, and we just add a little bit. It just takes it away from being a one-dimensional type of piece where it's just, it only has, you know, a light and a dark. Now it's got a little mixture of, and if I look carefully, I actually see greens back in here. So it's not, I'm not inventing. I'm using what I see, and I'm just pushing it a little bit. And man, if you have the time, it can make all the difference in just a simple ground plane like that. So the whole thing is starting to shape up. I can see some areas up in here that need work. And I can, with a knife, add, there's a branch. There's another branch. See one coming over that way. And you start to kind of build. The whole thing is shaping up. Don't like the heaviness of that. Again, I let my eye look over the whole painting. My eye went to that. Then I looked at my reference and I went, yep. But I also see some more interesting greens back in here, even down in here. But let's get that one area that I just said I didn't like. So we take the blue and the brown, and we're just about 5 minutes away, if that. Probably even closer than that. So now that became a nice thin branch. Even thinner at the tip. There we go. So we got nice thin little areas, and if I need to, this where the trees come together, there's an angle of a tree that comes across. I just noticed, like that. And then there are little, this is the kind of thing you can drive yourself crazy. You can go as far as you want to or as simple as you want to, but there's some little branches. I like to indicate them. Just put nice strokes in, just so the strokes feel good, you know? A little bit. We're going to call it quits in just a second. So it's feeling like it's basically done. The whole thing looks good. It's like most of the things that I'm able to accomplish in this hour and a half is looks complete, but it's not as complete as I would like it to be. But it's a nice loose indication of what I would get if I were painting this outdoors in a 1.5 hour session. If I were painting it outdoors, I would probably be able to work another hour or an hour and a half into it. Just so you've got about 2 to 3 hours in that range, generally when you're working outside, because of the way the light moves. I would probably, this would change radically in here, would change radically. And so that's kind of the area. What I usually do is I find areas that I know that are going to change quick, I try and get those done. And then if I lay off other areas, I can lay off like foliage back in all the shadow foliage. It's not going to change a whole lot. So I could probably lay off that a lot longer. In any event, hopefully you guys, this is fun to do. It looked like it's set up pretty fast. And then the embellishment is the thing that I hope you can see how you can go on forever into that and just carry it and see things, carry it further and further. Basically with the concept of time. How much time do I really want to put into it? Do I want it to be very abrupt? Do I want it, in this case, I didn't want it to look extremely real, but I wanted it to be convincing. So that's a key, that one line, convincing. And that's basically what Impressionists do, is they make their work feel convincing. Sometimes very indicated and not really refined. Other times just beautifully refined. And so, you know, it just depends upon where your mind sits in all of that. But there you have it. Hope you got a lot out of it. I got an almost done painting out of it. So happy painting, everybody. I appreciate you guys constantly tuning in, looking at this stuff. Sometimes they come out pretty nice, and sometimes they kind of come out like paintings that we all do. Okay? Thank you very much. I'm going to wave. Happy painting. Let's bring this just a little bit closer so we might be able to see it. I have to move like that. And there's the full effect. A little bleached out of the top from the top light, but that's it, guys. Thank you.